Good day, fair misfits. I'm your local man, Foxless Pancakes, and today I'm going to be reviewing the creepiest game that I've played that isn't a horror game, Oxenfree.
Hey kids, wanna play a game?
Oxenfree is another one of those strange adventure type games similar to the likes of Night in the Woods or Life is Strange in terms of its playstyle. And just like Night in the Woods and Life is Strange, you're not really playing Oxenfree because it has great gameplay. You're playing it for the experience, for the characters, for the narrative. These games are more notable for what you see and hear rather than analyzing how, say, something like movement controls work, which actually makes explaining this game to my friends extremely difficult. To any of my friends, or just anyone watching this vid, hey, thanks for taking the time to check my content out. This is the best explanation I have on this game so far, so you better listen up. The story of Oxenfree revolves around 5 teenagers who decide to spend the night on Edwards Island, a small island with a natural park that covers the majority of it. It's mostly notable for being a tourist or high school field trip destination where everyone gets bored immediately and wants to leave within the hour. The only odd thing about the island is that if you stand in certain spots on the island and tune a shortwave radio to a certain frequency, you can hear some weird interference come through. It's nothing more than, oh, that's a bit spooky. But a group of teenagers who all don't know each other too well and have voluntarily isolated themselves on an island for at least 8 hours are bound to get bored with each other pretty damn quickly and want to find something interesting to do. In order to spare myself from calling everyone the teenagers, let me introduce you to them first. So Alex is the player character whose main personality traits involve explaining herself in long-winded bizarre analogies and making sarcastic jabs at things. Huh. Reginald, or just Ren, is the extrovert who coordinated the event. He's the type of leader that does a lot of things with a positive attitude even if they're without any logical direction. You have Nona, whom I didn't interact with enough to get a read on her personality and who seems to be the quiet type anyway. Then there's Jonas, Alex's new stepbrother following her mom's recent remarriage, who has had a bad streak in the past and is trying to rectify his mistakes, though his actions and demeanor tend to slip every once in a while. Finally, there's Clarissa, the bitter, judgmental type who supposedly has a heart of gold, but my immediate reaction was to go out of my way to avoid her following my first interaction with her. As with any story with a heavy narrative focus, we of course figure out that there's a lot more to these characters than meets the eye, and it's up to the player to pick whom they want to spend the most time on the island with. I personally went with Jonas the most because I wanted to use the time to help him and Alex get comfortable around one another, and because he was the character that was the most difficult read at the start. I guess Nona was kind of there in my playthrough, but it was the fresh familial bond that I opted into learning more about rather than whatever Nona's story would turn out to be. The game is fully voiced as well, something that was both a blessing and a curse at times. The voice acting was done so well and fit each character to the point where I initially felt bad interrupting them by choosing a dialogue option. I say initially though, because the developers, being the big smart people they are, included lines like, "Well, as I was saying," for characters in case you broke their sentence off. That's just some smart planning right there. Now, forget everything I said about the characters and the archetypes they fulfill, because one thing that's great about Oxenfree is that the way that these characters interact with Alex throughout the playthrough depends largely on how the player responds to them. I may have these preconceived notions about how each character behaves in game, but in reality these things can change depending on who's playing. I know this because at the end of the game, Alex voices over the last photo that the group takes on the boat back to the mainland, explaining where everyone went after their adventure on the island. Then the game shows stats on what decisions you picked versus other people that have played the game, meaning that there are multiple endings and dialogue options that can be explored. And unlike Night in the Woods, Oxenfree is designed to be played over and over again. Am I going to though? Probably not. And for me that has to do with the difference in narrative focus. Oxenfree has several characters to interact with, but the main story and focus is largely centered around these spooky radio ghosts. It all starts when Alex gets bored and starts exploring the cave next to the beach with Jonas in an attempt to investigate the source of the radio interference. When she gets into the cave, she somehow manages to open a rip into another dimension using her shortwave radio device, through which some ghostly beings communicate with her and start wreaking havoc on reality. No, I am not making this up. Immediately, the crew decides that they need to get off this island, which they've been voluntarily, mind you, stranded on. The only problem is that this small island, being as insignificant as it is, has no real reliable way of communicating with the outside world, especially since nobody's supposed to be on the island in the middle of the night to begin with. As their efforts continue and as time passes, the specters start gaining more and more control on the physical world, from leaving ghost handprints on walls to looping time back in on itself and even down to human possession. Creepy? Absolutely. Horror game? Not exactly. I don't want to spoil too much of the game, but with the time loop sections, you're shown multiple possible outcomes for that specific scenario, which delves into the theory of multiple parallel dimensions. This is an important recurring theme because the ghosts themselves emphasize that although our decisions have a slight impact on the story that's told, the end result will always be the same. The end doesn't change. No matter what happens, everything ends the way you'd expect. It's a theme that I grew to love because I've always been a fan of science fiction and weird alternate dimensions, and it's the main reason why Inception is and still remains to be my favorite movie. While the game may be about Alex fighting ghosts of spirits past, however, I find that the underlying theme has to do a lot with a conflict of two opinions on how life should be lived. On one hand, you have the ghosts, whose ability to reach into separate realities maintain a rather fatalistic mindset, saying that no matter what our choices are in life, we are just fated to end up the same way in the end. On the other hand, you have Alex, a character who understands that the best way to lead one's life is to use your past as a tool for guidance into the future. Past experiences and memories, as horrible as they can be at times, can also provide with themselves invaluable life lessons. This is best displayed by the interactions that Alex has with the ghost towards the end of the game, where instead of asking what they plan to do, she asks why. I suppose that would be a pretty normal response to any sort of interdimensional spiritual invasion, but it does seem interesting to me that Alex would call into question their motivation over their MO. I'm definitely reading too deep into this. I feel like an English teacher overanalyzing that a character says or does in a scene. There probably wasn't much more thought that was put into the writing at that point of the scene beyond how would this character react. Yet at the same time, the way that lines up so perfectly really speaks to how consistent the writers were for their characters. The characters were written so well that I kind of wish I was able to experience this game for the first time again, because the main thing holding it all together is the creepy and unpredictable happenings that are a result of the ghosts wreaking havoc on the island. In Night in the Woods, there was this massive mystery that tied everything together, but it was about the characters and the changes in their life first, and that main plot second. Here in Oxenfree, the reverse happens, where the main focus was centered around the ghosty dudes to the point where it felt it pulled away from the character writing. On top of that, now that I know what to expect from each character and ghost interaction, I'm pretty much numb to the element of surprise and I guess horror that was there before. It's kind of like watching Shutter Island for the first time, wherein you'll never be able to experience the same spine-chilling moments or that massive twist ending again after the first time watching the movie. It's kind of ironic that I'd say that I didn't like Oxenfree nearly as much as Night in the Woods, since Oxenfree kind of improves on a lot of things that I felt NITW didn't do as well. For instance, Oxenfree technically has a resolution. Its art design and atmosphere are far more detailed, and it even goes far to say that the soundtrack was more impressive than the oft more simplistic angle that NITW approached it from. Even the characters in both games were solid standouts, but what I truly didn't like about this game was how the story elements didn't feel earned per se. In NITW, I had to consciously choose where I wanted to go and whom I wanted to talk to and how I wanted to mold the elements of the narrative to learn more about characters that I cared about the most. Here in Oxenfree, since the game is so largely dedicated to one defined narrative path, a lot of the dialogue options I was presented felt like they were forced on me, which feels weird given how many were available. Sure, it was enjoyable while I was there, but the game is designed to be played over and over again, something that I've already expressed I have no real interest in at the moment. Though saying that I dislike the game would be wildly inaccurate. The way that the writing was handled isn't the majority of the game, though I do wish it was more of a highlight. Instead, what utterly blew me away was the sound design and art. For some reason, the simplistic models of the characters reminded me of that game Inside, and I think that subconscious reminder of that game enhanced the eerie atmosphere present in Oxenfree. Now, I don't want to say that I have a phobia, but I do get easily unsettled by glitching screen effects. Whenever those bassy, unearthly static sounds started coming through the radio, it would send shivers down my spine. This in conjunction with the distorted pads and LFOs that persisted through the game's soundtrack truly sets in the feeling of uncertainty and general eeriness. The setting in a half-forest, half-abandoned army base was there to bait me into a feeling of familiarity, which would be quickly undermined with a sense of unease, set on by the darkness that shrouded everything I thought I knew in mystery. Oxenfree made me feel adequately creeped out and hopeless at times without relying on cheap jump scares to set me on edge. All that the game did to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and the most positive thing I took away from it after completing my first playthrough, was build a convincing atmosphere through the clever use of both art and music. Like I said before though, the linear narrative path ruins my interest in playing the game again. There may be different endings I can get, but I find that the spooks and overall atmosphere are best experienced in the first and only time I've played it so far. If that remains the same and the only change I'd realistically be making is maybe getting Clarissa to like me the second time around, then I'm not interested in trying again.
And that's all I have for this video. If you guys did enjoy the video, consider leaving a like, subscribing. Hope you all have a great day, night, or space cycle depending on when and where you watch this, and I will see you on the flip side. Goodbye.